The Troubles is the name given to a period of ethnic and sectarian conflict fought in Northern Ireland between part of the community, the Unionists, who wanted to remain a part of the United Kingdom, and the nationalist community who wanted to become a part of the Irish Republic to the south. It was fought from between 1969 and around 30 years later it ended in 1998. Rather than being a conventional war between armies of different nation states, the Troubles are instead an irregular or low-level war between various paramilitary organisations and the British Army in between. The Troubles have been covered in Northern Ireland quite a lot here on YouTube in various videos and by various news channels, particularly recently with the Brexit vote. But something we don't normally hear about when it comes to the Troubles is the role of the Republic of Ireland, because of course Northern Ireland shares the island with the Republic. And while we know the British Army became heavily involved in Northern Ireland in trying to sort out its troubles, we don't often hear about the attempt made by the Irish Army, or the possible plans thereof, to sort out the Troubles in their own way. To understand the Republic of Ireland's position in 1969 at the onset of the Troubles, we have to look back at its earlier history. It had gained independence from the British Empire in 1922, becoming the Irish Free State. However, within 10 years it would be embroiled in another war with their erstwhile enemy. However, this would be the Anglo-Irish Trade War. Featuring a series of embargoes, this would serve to cripple the Irish economy in its nascent years. In 1938, however, this war came to an end, and soon the rest of the world would be at war with one another in the Second World War, a conflict which the Irish sat out and remained neutral in. 4 years after the war's end in 1949, the Irish Free State would leave the British Commonwealth and declare itself a republic, the new Republic of Ireland, and in the 1960s it saw an economic upsurge and boom. However, while things were getting better in the new Republic of Ireland, in Northern Ireland trouble was brewing. This was because there was a large Catholic minority in Northern Ireland who were treated largely as second-class citizens, and with the civil rights movements of the 1960s they began protesting for more rights in line with the Protestant majority. This came to a head in 1969 when a series of demonstrations took place in Derry. Please note that Unionists prefer to say Londonderry, as do people in the United Kingdom, while Nationalists and those in the Republic of Ireland refer to the town as Derry. In any case, there were protests in this city which were cracked down upon by the police forces in Northern Ireland, which resulted in more violent protests and the involvement of various armed groups, which saw the situation deteriorate further to the point where it has been recorded to history as the Battle of the Bogside. With an entire area of the city, the Bogside became the site of a large communal riot when the police tried to enter the area, resulting in several days of violence, following which the British Army was sent in to restore order, leaving many hundreds injured in the wake. The Irish government to the south took notice of what was happening just across its northern border. The violence against fellow Catholic Irish Republicans shocking many of the population in the Republic of Ireland. Indeed, very soon after, the Taoiseach, the Prime Minister essentially of Ireland, released a statement on the 13th of August as this was going on, saying, "It is clear now that the present situation cannot be allowed to continue. It is evident also that the Stormont government, that is the government in Northern Ireland, is no longer in control of the situation. Indeed, the present situation is the inevitable outcome of the policies pursued for decades by successive Stormont governments. It is clear also that the Irish government can no longer stand by and see innocent people injured and perhaps worse. It is obvious that the RUC is no longer accepted as an impartial police force, neither would the employment of British troops be acceptable, nor would they be likely to restore peaceful conditions, certainly not in the long term." He reiterated that the Irish government have, therefore, requested the British government to apply immediately to the United Nations for the urgent dispatch of a peacekeeping force to the 6 counties of Northern Ireland, and have instructed the permanent representative to the United Nations to inform the Secretary-General of this request. We have also asked the British government to see to it that police attacks on the people of Derry should cease immediately. It was one line in particular from the Taoiseach's speech which would create hope, fear and anticipation in equal measure between the Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland and the United Kingdom. And this was his famous line of, "It is clear also that the Irish government can no longer stand by and see innocent people injured and perhaps worse." This was taken by many in all 3 countries to be an indication that the Republic of Ireland was preparing to go to war in the north. Now, I know what you're thinking. The idea that the Republic of Ireland would go to war with its neighbour, the United Kingdom, seems absolutely crazy today. Indeed, thankfully, there were a lot of people that thought that idea was just as crazy back in 1969. But there were also quite a lot of people in the Irish cabinet and indeed amongst the Irish population who at the time did seriously consider this. And it's important to look at this from the eyes and the viewpoint of people from the period. Because let's not forget that just around 50 years earlier, the Irish had fought the Irish War of Independence from 1919 to 1921, which had been a fully fledged conflict against the United Kingdom, the British Empire at that time. And so it was seen by many that actually in 1969 that they were continuing on the same fight to liberate those counties in the north of Ireland that had remained part of the United Kingdom. That in actual fact it was part of their republican duty, just as many of their fathers and indeed some of those who had fought during the Easter Rising and the later Irish War of Independence against the British were still alive at this point and saw it as their duty to go and to free, as they saw it, the north of Ireland. And to this end, the Irish government commissioned the Irish Army with a plan to invade Northern Ireland. This was codenamed Operation Armageddon. And I just want to make clear before you start hammering away at the keyboard, that this isn't actual history, but this was what was called a war game. It was a planned operation to see what would likely be the outcome if the Irish Army did indeed intervene in the north. The first part of the plan was that several targets in Northern Ireland, specifically in the area around Belfast, would be hit by Irish commandos. These would include the docks in Belfast as well as certain civil points, Belfast Airport, the BBC studios, as well as other key industries in the northwest of the country. The Irish hoped that by targeting Belfast and starting a somewhat guerrilla campaign in the northwest of Northern Ireland, British security forces would be moved away from the borders, thus allowing for the second phase, which was that Irish troops, around 4 brigades worth, would cross and would attack the towns of Derry and Newry, which were both largely Catholic majority, and take over these towns, thus allowing Catholics to escape the country. However, there were a lot of problems with this plan. One was that the Irish Army would need transport, and they did not have anywhere near enough troop transport to get them there. And so part of the plan relied on them taking normal civilian buses out of service from the Irish bus service and using them as their transport method to get to the front line. Another problem was the army itself, as the plan required around 12,000 well-trained Irish soldiers for this exercise. However, only around 2,136 Irish soldiers were combat ready to take part in such an exercise. Of course, the really big problem was the elephant in the room, the British war elephant, because they would be taking on the United Kingdom to invade Northern Ireland, because Northern Ireland was a part of the United Kingdom, and so this would really be a declaration of war. Although the Irish tried to get around this and did not want to declare war when stepping over the boundary for political reasons, though for all intents and purposes, the British would respond as they had been invaded. In 1969, given the situation, the British had around 3,000 troops already in the country, and these were well-trained troops. Of course, the British had been regularly at war. Some of them would be veterans from the Second World War, and including part of the RUC, the Royal Ulster Constabulary, they also had many well-trained men among them. Not to mention the fact that the British Empire and the United Kingdom, they were very experienced at carrying out large-scale military offensives as they were doing that worldwide. And of course, they also had a very well-developed navy and air force to call upon, which the Irish most certainly did not. As if the British Army's own strength was not enough, they were also a member of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, whose manifesto promised that an attack on one is an attack on all, and so Ireland would likely be diplomatically excommunicated from NATO if they did indeed make this attack, as well as of course the possibility that the United States would get involved, although this seems unlikely because the British Army was more than capable of dealing with their neighbour to the south in Ireland. There was also another problem, and this was a more diplomatic problem, and this came from the acronym of the EEC, the European Economic Community, which would later morph and become the European Union, as at the time both the Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom wanted to become a part of this organisation. If the Republic of Ireland was found to be attacking a friendly neighbour without provocation, which this would ultimately be, then it would seriously hinder their application to join the EEC, as well as any other diplomatic ties with European countries. And in fact, it's thought that if the Irish had gone on to do this, then they would likely remain a somewhat backwater in Europe, as they had been following their neutrality in the Second World War. A final acronym which frustrated Irish plans for an intervention in Northern Ireland was the UN, the United Nations, because Ireland had since 1955 been a member of the UN, and as you remember from Taoiseach Jack Lynch's speech, he called upon a UN peacekeeping force to be sent into Northern Ireland instead of the impartial, or, well, it was meant to be impartial British Army in Northern Ireland at the time. However, if the Republic of Ireland as a sovereign state invaded Northern Ireland, pulled back its forces, and then again requested for a UN peacekeeping force to be sent in, that counts as a breach of international law, as at that point the Republic of Ireland would be creating the military situation needed for the United Nations to get involved, and thus they would be breaching international law in so doing. And at the time it was the policy of the Republic of Ireland to try and get the United Nations involved instead of the British soldiers, which they saw as being biased towards the Protestant Unionist cause, which ultimately they did turn out to be. There was also the matter of that if the Irish army had actually gone across the border, it most likely would have turned the low-level conflict in Northern Ireland between various paramilitary organisations into a full-scale war. If the IRA had heard that the real Irish army had taken over Derry, then that would have caused them to take up arms to try and seize the rest of the country, while at the same time many of the Protestant paramilitary organisations would likely have rallied and committed more atrocities against the Catholic population and indeed against the army and any others. In the end, of course, in 1969 and for the rest of the Troubles, Ireland would not become militarily involved in Northern Ireland and politically didn't do that much either. However, it was the Republic of Ireland's stance throughout the Troubles that if Ireland was to become united, it should be from a vote of a majority in Northern Ireland and not through any violent or other means. Although that isn't quite the end of the story of 1969, as eventually the Irish army was deployed, but this was along the border to take up Catholic refugees, as thousands of Catholic civilians fled into the Republic of Ireland during that time, and they set up medical field hospitals to help those who had been injured in the fighting. But as I said, for the remainder of the conflict, the Republic of Ireland would remain largely to itself, even though it came under several attacks from various paramilitary unionist organisations. It would not militarily become involved. However, some would take things into their own hands, as in 1970 the Irish government put aside £100,000, at the time Irish pounds I believe, that were meant to help the Catholic civilians who had fled across the border, but it was found that some government officials had instead used this money to buy arms with which they had armed the IRA, the Irish Republican Army. But that is it for this video. Do let me know if you found it interesting, as I found a documentary about this and I didn't know that the Republic of Ireland had even created some kind of plan to get involved in Northern Ireland, let alone to invade it. Let me know if you found this kind of thing interesting, and I'd love to look at some more Irish history, some more Northern Irish history and things of the period as well. I've seen that a lot of people enjoy watching my content when it is about Ireland and indeed Northern Ireland, and so I thought I would get down and make some more of this if this is what you'd like to see. But do let me know in the comments below if you have any other suggestions and things that you find interesting. In the meantime, check out the other videos that I shared in this one, and until then, I have been Hilbert, and this has been The History.